Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Ansible library. This is going to be my top 10 books that I read in 2025. I have 3 videos out that I released pretty recently where I tier rank everything I had read in 2025, including all the physical books I did, all the audio books, all the digital copies of things that I read. So it was a pretty big undertaking ranking all of those, but those links will be in the description of the video and at the end of the video if you want to check out, see sort of what my year of reading looked like. But today I'm just focusing now on my top 10 books that I physically own. So I'm not including the audiobooks or anything like that. And let's just hop right in. Number 10 on my list is The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. And I love this cover. I love this art. I had some other versions of it when I first had bought this, but when I found this version of it, I loved it. I thought it was a pretty cool cover. I really did. Yeah, of course I liked it. It's in my top 10, so I don't have to state that for all of these, but I thought it was a really cool sort of idea, and I really enjoyed his writing. The Earth is experiencing all these nightly meteor showers, and everybody is captivated by these meteor showers. But anybody who ends up watching these meteor showers ends up going blind, and so it's just a few people who didn't see the meteor showers or couldn't or are blind to begin with or were in the hospital or something. They didn't succumb to this loss of vision, and so the planet has gone blind, and that in itself would be kind of a pretty terrible thing to happen and a big thing for people to overcome. But then you throw in that the earth has sort of been cultivating and mass growing these plants called Triffids that they think they came out of Russia from somewhere, but the oil for them is very, very uh, valuable. So there's these mass Triffids farms all over the place, but these plants are unique in that they are able to walk, and they have this barb they shoot out on this stinger, on this whip, that can hit a target from far away, and it instantly will kill you. And then they wait for the thing to die, then they'll rip the flesh off of it to consume the flesh, and that's how they hunt, and that's how they feed. And so you have a world that is now blind being terrorized by these plants that are actively hunting people. And it's this cool sort of like mixed catastrophe that's happening. And it's a zombie story before zombie stories really were a thing. And a lot of the things you see in it are replicated and pulled from this book to for modern zombie stories and zombie movies. And even the beginning of the book, when the main character Bill, I think his name was, wakes up in the hospital and finds everyone blind or dead and the city abandoned, and not knowing what's going on. That was sort of the inspiration for the beginning of 28 Days Later, where the character wakes up in the hospital to the zombie attack and Walking Dead, and this sort of mindless pressing horde coming at your borders is it's like the zombie apocalypse, but it's these plants. And so it was a really fun read, and it was a really good sort of dive into John Wyndham for me as my first of his that I read. Is it just felt like there was some aspects of like peril and danger in it, but everyone, all the survivors in it was just like too calm for me, and everything was just too sort of matter of fact handled with, and there was no this like overhanging dread, it felt like. And he's been known to, other authors have said that the John Wyndham's the master of like the cozy catastrophe, where it's this horrible thing has happened, but it's for the survivors that endured the initial attack, it's a pretty well off living. Like for people that have C, the Triffids aren't in itself a big threat. They're able to find food, able to drive, able to travel, and so they have it pretty good. And so it was just a lot of the characters. It's this horrible thing they're experiencing, but they just seem too calm about it. So that was kind of a little bit annoying for me, but I loved it. I loved reading it. I loved seeing sort of all the parallels with all the zombie stuff in it, but it just didn't get up into that top of my top 10 for me. But I'm happy keeping at least a John Wyndham on there because I've liked everything he's read, but this one was, thinking about it more after reading it, has sort of become, yeah, my favorite so far of his. Next up, number 9 for my top 10 of the year was A Spell for Chameleon. Now, I have just this hardcover, The Magic of Xanth, which is the first 3 of the Xanth series books of A Spell for Chameleon, The Source of Magic, and Castle Rugna. And when I read Spell for Chameleon, I just had the paperback version of it, but then I found this pretty big, awesome hardcover collection. So got it because I knew I wanted to read at least a couple more of the Xanth books. I know there's a lot out there, but going into Spell for Chameleon, I didn't have a lot of high hopes. I had kind of been burned out by fantasy stories. Everything was feeling the same to me. All the tropes felt overdone and reused in every story. And Spell for Chameleon, yeah, has some of those tropes of, an individual with apparently no magic um, in a magical world, and how does he survive? And so I didn't have a lot of high hopes, but when I started reading it, it was the most magical like story I had read, where like, I mean that in the sense of every aspect of everyone's life in this land of Xanth is totally like a magic permeates all aspects of everyone's life. And I just thought for that reason alone, it was a lot of fun to read because everyone living in this magical land of Xanth, which is in our real world, but it's protected by this barrier that no one can get in and out of. It's hidden, it's invisible, it's always moving. And so, but the people that live in it, everyone has sort of a magic type or a certain magic they can do. And the main character doesn't have that. So he goes on this journey to find Chameleon, this sort of like grand wizard who can help him get magic. And so it's just his journey with that and his journey with fighting this dark wizard and the adventure he goes on and the characters he meets. And on paper, it sounds like a typical story, but I loved how crazy Piers Anthony got with it and how every plant and river and body of water and tree and animal and everything has some aspect of magic to it, or there's a curse on it, or you have to. So just how would somebody live in this land and the magical creatures in it and stuff like that. So I thought it was a lot of fun. And so I was fine putting it in my top 10 because it just caught me off guard and it sort of reinvigorated me for fantasy again. And after reading that one, I read a couple more fantasy throughout the year that I placed pretty high, but it was by far just for like sheer enjoyment out of the story that I have to add it to it. Next, we got 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. I love this story as well. Like, once again, I don't need to keep saying that, but I gotta just, I'll keep saying it for each one because it was a lot of fun to read. And I had watched the movie forever ago. Watching the movie, I just remember having a lot of questions and being confused. And I was pretty young when I watched it as well. And so it just left me with more questions than answers. But reading this book, it was awesome. It was great because all those questions I had were answered. And even just like in the movie, that opening scene with the monkeys with the monolith, and it was this weird, confusing building scene with this musical score and stuff. But it just was like, what did I just watch? But in this, a good chunk of the beginning of the book is all just explaining about that and explaining about how these monoliths are searching for signs of higher intelligence in creatures and then giving them that push towards the next stage of evolution and monitoring their growth and stuff like that. And so following this group of apes as they slowly got smarter and stuff, and then transitioning into modern times and the mystery of these monoliths and the journey that people go on to find it. And I found all his science to be, hard science, felt very real, very factual. I know he's a smart guy, Arthur C. Clarke, and so everything felt plausible and so thought out and how everything would work. And everything going on with Hal on the ship and why he goes crazy and everything like that. It was a breath of fresh air and, blowing all those cobwebs out of unanswered questions I had from the movie. And the ending of the book was great and it satisfied me, whereas the ending of the movie just confused me. And so I loved it. I want to go watch the movie again now after reading the book because I feel like I'll get so much more out of it. The book was able to, flesh out things way more. And so it was a lot of fun. And it's one of my favorite now by Arthur C. Clarke. I have been reading quite a bit of his, but I enjoyed it a lot. Number 7 is William Tenn's of Men and Monsters. And I have reviews of all of these on my channel if you want to go sort of look around for sort of more in-depth things. Right off the bat, the opening paragraph of the book caught my attention so much that I had to just keep reading. And it's about humanity is living in these burrows, and it's discovered that they're living in the burrows of these 500-foot tall aliens that have conquered the earth, and they have sort of de-evolved to a degree to survive living in the walls of these monsters homes. And humanity's been reduced pretty much to vermin, and they are the rats and the pests of these monsters, breaking into their food pantry to steal food. And I thought it was very like cleverly written and very well progression of story, where the main character Eric the Only, he's known as, the journey he goes on, and just the slow discovery of the environment that they're living in, and the discovery that they're these tiny things. It's not that humanity has shrunk down, or they weren't they were invaded and overpowered. It's just they were invaded by something so understandably gigantic that there was nothing we could do about it. And we were just, to us, from these aliens, we're not even considered intelligent, and so we are these pests. And so it had a really clear message about how can humanity call these monsters evil for torturing and exterminating and killing these humans, when we did the same thing to the insects and pests and vermins of our generation, of our world, when we were number one, and deeming them to be unintelligent. So it had this really a simple message like that, but then there was a lot of deeper things, and I was really satisfied with the ending. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it put humanity in an entirely different uh, light for their role in the galaxy. And uh, a female character is introduced, and I was expecting it to be a typical male female interaction in these types of books and in the situation they're in, expecting a gratuitous sex scene or whatever. But she was a very strong, well written character. She was very intelligent. She wasn't a damsel in distress. She was an active member of this group of people as they're trying to escape and work their way through monster territory. And so she felt very refreshing as a character of the time, because so many of the books of this era of science fiction the way they write women is very hard to read, in my opinion. So that was a breath of fresh air, and I loved it. I want to find. I think it was the only full novel that William Tenn wrote, and he has short stories that he wrote that I'm keeping my eye open. And there's a 2-volume hardcover collection of his stuff where it's all his stuff together. And I need to find it. I need to read it, because I love this book so much that I just want to try some of his other stuff out. This top 10 book ranking was hard for me, because so many things I liked so much that I couldn't decide which was, what order it should go into. So even sitting here now talking about it again, I feel like I should have put it higher in my top 10, but we're going to leave it number 7. Number 6, Brian Aldiss, Hothouse. This book was great as purely a world building sort of experiment. It's millions of years in Earth future, and the Earth has been tidally locked with the sun. And so the side of the Earth that's facing the planet has been overrun by just these trees and vegetation, and almost all mammal life and animal life has been wiped out. Plants and vegetation are the dominant predator and the dominant species on the planet, and humans have de-evolved in sort of these short little pygmy type creatures that live in the trees. And it's just following this tribe of these humans in the trees, and just the hell that is their life in this jungle, and the constant battle against the vegetation and nature that they have to go through. Um, and so for the world building alone, and the creativity that Brian Aldiss brings out in this idea, it was so much fun to read. And there's these enormous city-sized sort of plant spiders that have captured the moon in a web, and they traverse back and forth from the moon and the planet, to feed on radiation or something. And just that idea I thought was cool. And uh, but it's very not realistic in scientific in what would happen on a tidally locked planet. Brian Aldiss got a lot of heat from the other science fiction writers by this the idea in this story of the tidally locked Earth and what happens to it is so far fetched that they just sort of wrote it off as fantasy. And so, yeah, it doesn't make sense at all, and it doesn't make any like scientific sense at all. But it's so much fun to read, and the just the world is so amazing that I could overlook that. 5 is James Blish's The Day After Tomorrow. This one was the last book I read for the year, and it was awesome. It's the sequel to Black Easter, which is they're both part of the After Such Knowledge series by James Blish. And it was so much fun to read as well. And Easter was about how this man hires this prominent black magician to release all the demons and princes of hell that he has contracts with onto the earth for 24 hours and just see what happens. Day After Judgment picks up immediately after all these demons have been released, and Armageddon's pretty much happened. They will not return to hell. They claim God is dead. And so it picks up immediately from there, but it was a lot funner than Black Easter. It's following the same characters, adding a couple more, but it was very much this sort of like look on how the US military would respond to a demon invasion. Like the city of hell has risen in Death Valley in the United States, and it's a lot of the book is about how the American military, trying to figure out how this nuclear Armageddon happened and who is responsible, and then discovering, it's demons, and still deciding we're going to fight back. We're going to gather the forces we have, and we're going to march on the gates of hell, and we're going to fight. And it was just this, it was really fun for the darkness of what was going on, and just the things that happened to these soldiers and the things these people did, and the demons and devils. And you would expect it goes the way you would expect, like a modern army fighting the forces of hell. But it was really clever and really beautifully written, and the interaction, like the main characters from the first book are all traveling sort of separately to get to this city. They're all summoned or traveling there for some reason of their own, and they join up again. And the ending of the book was awesome and like perfect for what it was, in my opinion. And it ends really fast. And I'm noticing a lot of James Blish is like that, at least the stuff I've been reading, where they come to the climax of the story, and whatever happens, and then the book is done. And so it's just left you sort of like with this almost ripping a Band-Aid off feeling, where you're sitting there thinking about what you just read and having to come to terms with what you just read. And so I thought it was great. And it's by far my favorite of Blish that I've read so far. Okay, Charlie Jane Anders, The City in the Middle of the Night. This is number 4. City in the Middle of the Night. This was a beautiful story, and I love this story. And where Hothouse was sort of this fantastical, overblown idea and concept of what a tidally locked planet would look like, City in the Middle of the Night is a more scientifically grounded and realistic look at what a city terminally, or a world terminally locked with a star, would look like. And it's about these cities, 2 cities on this planet that live on the terminal line between day and night. And it's the only habitable area. It's too hot in the sun, freezing cold in the dark side. So they have to live and travel only on this terminal line. And it's about the one main city, I can't remember what the city's name is very controlled by this caste system and everybody's like, it's constantly not daytime, but like dusk, or so it's never gets fully dark, but people's lives are so strictly regulated with when they can sleep and when they can work and what types of jobs they can get. And it's very controlled. And so it's these 2 friends who are in the university there wanting to fight back against the system, and they're all just talk and blunder. And one of them does something dumb that the other friend takes the blame for, thinking she'll just get fined, and thinking it's better for me, who's a nobody, a nothing, not worth being in this school, taking the fall for my friend who's going to go places. And they end up as a message to everyone else thinking of revolution. They banish her beyond the walls of the city on the night side to freeze and die. But she is saved by these, they call them crocodiles on the planet. They're these giant lizard bug type creatures that uh, people will kill on sight because they think they're these dangerous things. But it turns out they're an intelligent life form on this planet, and they can talk and communicate telepathically and by reading each other's minds and stuff. And one of these crocodiles saves this girl and helps her sneak back into the city and saves her life and makes this connection with her. And so it's just this beautiful story about, and like super well written about like life on a planet like this in the middle of the night or on the terminal line. And things happen. The girl and her friend have to leave the city, and they join this band of like black market smugglers who travel between the two cities. And it's just their journey between the cities and the perils they face, and just the relationship between these two girls and the two women, I should say. And one's wanting revolution, and one's wanting to just save her friend's life by stopping her from joining a revolution, and trying to help these crocodile aliens and trying to find out why they are dying. But it was a lot of fun, and it was a satisfying ending, and it left me wanting more. It felt kind of like it was a cliffhanger almost of an ending, and that she was going to write a sequel to it, but she stated she has no plans of writing a sequel to it. So it was still a very satisfying ending, and it I was happy reading it. It left me wanting more, but I didn't feel like I was missing anything by there not being a sequel. So I would really recommend it. Top three now. Top three. 2312 by Kim Stanley Robinson. This was a book, if you watch my other videos where I review it, I had mixed feelings on it at the time, but the more I sit on it and the more I think about it, it just kept building and building and building. And so I had to put it in my top three. And I'm finding I like sort of hard science fiction. And Kim Stanley Robinson is sort of like king at that, in my opinion, now after reading this. And it's very much if a lot of the story very much felt like it was sort of his way of throwing all these ideas of his of what sort of terraforming the solar system would look like, and how you would go about, terraforming Mars and making it habitable, and what you would have to do to Venus to make it habitable, and the process these people are going through to try to do that, and building these light array systems. That job is to send light to the moons of Jupiter so that they can get enough sunlight to grow crops and have warmth, and terraforming those moons, and mining Pluto for resources to build generational ships to go out into the void, and these Terrarian sort of asteroids that are just in constant movement around the solar system, and how each one has been designed and built and habitable, and the city on Mercury that's on a constant track that's staying ahead of the sunlight and staying in the night zone of Mercury, and it's this beautiful city that's constantly moving. And so there was so much like beauty in the solar system now, and the way he writes about these things just was amazing. And at the time I was more interested in reading those part of the books than the actual plot. And the plots involving this mystery with this one individual, Swan, I think her name was Swan, and the sort of hyper intelligent AI that might be going rogue, and this sort of like solar system spanning mystery. And to me, the story at that time fell on the back burner, and it felt like the only reason he had this plot in it was an excuse for Swan to go to all these different locations so he could write about the terraforming process, and he can write about these Terrarian asteroids. And so I didn't really care. But the more I think about it now, and it was a beautiful story of her and the relationship she makes and the journey she goes on. And uh, like the big finale of the book is in the background to just like this pure emotional connection she's having with this individual floating in space. And it just was this a great, great story. And the more I think about it, the more I realize like how important and great and well written that this plot was, and how it wasn't just background noise, and it should have been the front of my attention because it was so poignant, and so just like it strung you along well enough. And it's a long book, it's a big book, but it never felt long because those breaks between the mystery of it, where they're just exploring things, is where you really make a connection with these characters, and they like, and just these amazing things they're doing on Earth. And it's because the Earth has been sort of destroyed by global warming and global catastrophes and stuff, and just trying to rebuild the animal life on it and stop the glacier melting and stuff. So a lot of smart stuff in it. And so I know his like Red Mars trilogy. I have all of it. I was so hesitant to get into it because I heard it's very heavy on the science and very heavy on that kind of thing. But after reading 2312, like I want to get into more of that. It just drew me in so much that I want to experience more of that kind of thing. So that's why it's in my top three now. Number two. So number one and number two, it was a flip of the coin for which was which. I love both of these like the same, and so I just put them in this order just because this one number two I've read before, and so it wasn't sort of this amazing new experience for me for the year, but I still just loved it. And it's The Long Walk by Stephen King. And I read it a couple years ago, and I remember loving it back then. And I decided to read it again because, yes, I saw there was a movie coming out, which I did end up watching after I read the book. I just couldn't believe like a master Stephen King is, that he's able to write this full novel about this simple premise of a group of 100 boys. I think in the book it's 100 boys having to walk 4 miles an hour in this competition, and if they go below 4 miles an hour, they get 3 strikes, and then they're out. They're taken out of the game. And it's told entirely from the main character Garrity's perspective, and you're with him pretty much real time from the start of the race to the end of the race, and how the race concludes, you're there with him. And I just couldn't believe like how drawn in and how invested I became in this character and the group of boys he's with, on this simple premise where it's just them talking about their lives and what led them to this point and what they would do if they win, because the winner gets a cash prize, but they get to make one wish. They can ask for anything that they want and they will get it. And like America's being run by this major, and it's everything's just hinted at what the outside world is like outside of this race, outside of this walk. And you just sort of piece together tidbits throughout the story about what's actually going on in the world and what's going on in America. But I just thought it was amazing. And it was just this beautiful, his writing is beautiful, and the horror and the violence in it, it's pretty graphic at time, and that's Stephen King, but it all felt so real, and it all felt like this could be a possibility for us, like this sort of infatuation with prizes and game shows and things that people are having, and that they would be willing to put their life on the line for this chance of winning it big, and the nation's infatuation with watching it happen because it's a yearly thing. um, and so it was just amazing story to read, and the ending of it, even knowing how everything ended after reading it the first time, it still like gave me chills, and it still was this like, I could see a lot of people being kind of mixed feelings about the ending, but to me it was just like the inevitable conclusion to what a person would like, what would happen to a person after experience what this they experienced on this walk. And so it was just, I loved it, and I think I'll probably read it every year and get the same sort of satisfaction out of it. But now we're on to number one. And this is probably gonna, I don't know if you watch my other videos, it won't come as a surprise, but I don't feel like this is a well-known book. I've never really heard of it before. I found it, but it's Journey Beyond Tomorrow by Robert Sheckley. And this book is my number one, just purely by how surprised I was by it. I thought it was going to be like, the blurb on the back is talking about how man ruled Earth, but he was taken out by machines, and about this character, Jonas, going on this sort of journey and how the Earth falls to the machines. And so I thought it was going to be this sort of typical, old science fiction story about the rise of machines, but it was not that at all. And it was the funniest book I read for the year, and just the weirdest book. And it's following like this character Jonas, who grew up and was raised on this Polynesian island at this like power plant by his parents, and his parents were American citizens, but he was born and raised on this island, so he's never been to America. But with the death of his parents, the corporations of America shut down this plant, and so he decides, I'm going to go to America and see where my parents come from. And it's just this sort of like moment after moment after moment of him coming into these such crazy sort of scenarios and crazy sort of like stories. And it was just so fun to read. It's all these sort of untrustworthy narratives of these people telling the story about the journey of Jonas through America. And so it gives it all this like unrealistic quality. And it's all these stories sort of like told around campfires and stuff. But they were all just so much fun and so weird and crazy. Like he gets arrested and he goes to this like crazy or a jail, but the inmates want to stay in jail, and everyone's trying to break on the outside, trying to break into the jail, because in jail there's food and warmth and clothing. And so it's like the prisoners don't want to leave and the people want to get in. And it's this weird like duality of that and flipping everything on the head. And he goes to the Pentagon, or it's the hexagon. So it's not the Pentagon, it's the hexagon. And it's this maze that nobody knows how to get through because everyone was given a map, but the maps are wrong to confuse spies. So nobody knows how they're getting through the maze. And so just like funny stuff like that, weird stuff like that. And it's just his progression through America and how he's slowly like almost like a Forrest Gump story where he's sort of like drawn into these bigger groups and bigger, higher roles, and then is the cause of like the end of the world. Well, him not directly is the cause of the world as we know it, but everyone's stupidity around him is, and just misunderstandings. And I don't know how to describe it because it was nothing like I had read before, but it just became sort of this classic in my mind. And since then, I found like a big group of Robert Sheckley's books that I have to look into now, because if they're like this, if this is a standalone thing by him, I'll take it and love it and reread it and share it. But if everything else like his is like this, then he'll become one of my favorite authors, because it was just, uh, yeah, I don't know how to describe it more than that. It was just such a surprise and top of the list for my favorite book of the year. But that is be it. This was again a lot longer than I was planning. This was supposed to be just a quick little ramble, but showing off what I read and my favorites for the year. But hope you made it through. Let me know if you agree with my rankings. Let me know if you feel like things should be higher, if things don't deserve on it. Recommendations for other stuff to read. I love getting recommendations. I love looking for these books at used bookstores and finding these things out there. So thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you soon.